For most people, 11 p.m. is the time when the city begins to quiet down and thoughts turn to rest. But in my world, at the United Creations office in the heart of Chicago, it was the peak of the workday. I sat at my desk, surrounded by mountains of reports, the heavy aroma of cold Starbucks coffee hanging in the air. My temples were throbbing with exhaustion. My name is Valerie. For the last 5 years, Eve lived in 24/7 mode. 5 years ago, Matt, my husband, and I started this business in my uncle's cramped garage in the suburbs. Today, United Creations occupied 3 floors in a modern skyscraper in the Loop, the city's business district. Looking at the lights of nighttime Chicago outside the window, I couldn't help but smile. We had made it. Matt was always the face of the company. A charismatic business school graduate, he knew how to sweet-talk any investor and close million-dollar deals. I was the foundation. While Matt was flying on business jets and dining at steakhouses with partners, I made sure his grand plans were grounded in reality. In the first 2 years, I worked for 3. During the day, I was an ordinary clerk at a logistics company, giving every cent of my salary to Matt to cover the operating costs of our brainchild. In the evenings, I didn't go home to rest. I gave math lessons to high school students to pay the electricity bills and the lease on our old pickup truck. And at night, while Matt was already deep in sleep, I managed a small online clothing store on Etsy. I put every penny into the company's reserve fund. I never complained. Seeing Matt successful and confident was the ultimate reward for me. I wore the same jeans from Target, ate instant noodles, and convinced myself that children could wait. Everything was for the future. Matt always said, "Hang in there, Val. When we take off, you'll live like a queen in the Hamptons. You won't have to toil anymore." And now, that moment had arrived. Today we won a tender from a global corporation. Next month's profits were expected to exceed everything we had earned in the previous 3 years. It was a triumph. Today was also our 5th wedding anniversary. I had hoped for a romantic dinner at Alinea, or at least at home. But Matt called and said he had an urgent meeting with a new client in Indianapolis and would be back late. I understood. Work came first. But a spark of joy still burned in my soul. I decided to surprise him. Quickly packing my things, I stopped by my favorite bakery and bought a small chocolate cake that read, "Happy 5th anniversary, United Creations, our everything." When I pulled up to our home in Lincoln Park, which we had bought 2 years ago on a company loan, I was surprised. Matt's car was already in the garage. Strange, I thought, could the meeting have been canceled? The house was quiet, the lights in the living room were off. I went into the kitchen to drop my bag, but stopped at the stairs. A light was on upstairs, and laughter was coming from the room. It was my husband's laughter, followed by a woman's voice I knew all too well. Laura, Matt's secretary, whom he had hired just 3 months ago. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, trying not to make a sound, I went up to the 2nd floor. The bedroom door was ajar. The cloying scent of Laura's perfume, the same one that now constantly lingered in the office, wafted from the room. "You're just incredible, Matt," Laura cooed. "Finally, we got that contract." "Yeah, but I'm damn tired of pretending in front of Valerie," Matt replied with an irritation I had never heard before. "She works like a plow horse. Look at her, always disheveled, in those cheap clothes of hers. She seriously thinks the company grew because of her." Something snapped in my chest. "And when are you filing for divorce?" Laura asked petulantly. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be the mistress of this house." "Patience, babe. I have almost everything ready." She's so naive. Let her work for us a bit longer, until I choose the perfect moment. My legs turned to lead. The cake box I was clutching in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed a ton. I pushed the door open. Matt and Laura startled. There was no remorse in Matt's eyes, only cold anger. Laura shrieked and pulled up the blanket. The cake box slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. Chocolate frosting spread across the cold marble right at Matt's feet. "Why are you back?" Instead of apologizing, Matt simply sighed. "Weren't you supposed to be working overtime?" I stared at him, unable to believe my ears. "Overtime? I've been working overtime every single day for 5 years, Matt." "For this? So you could bring her into our bed?" Into the house I helped pay for? Matt calmly stood up and put on a robe. Laura, no longer hiding, smirked as she pulled on her dress. Enough, Valerie, don't be dramatic. It's over, my husband said in a move-on tone. Dramatic? I laughed nervously through my tears. I sacrificed my youth, worked 3 jobs so this company could survive. That was your choice, Laura chimed in, fixing her hair. You chose the role of the stupid wife who can be exploited. Matt needs an equal. A beautiful woman who knows how to take care of herself, not this. Shut up. I stepped toward her to slap her, but Matt grabbed my arm roughly. His fingers dug into my skin so hard I cried out. Don't you dare touch her, Valerie, he hissed. She's right. I'm sick to death of you. He pushed me away and walked over to the desk. Pulling a brown folder from the drawer, he threw it onto the bed. We're getting a divorce. I've already prepared everything. Just sign. The word divorce hit harder than the betrayal itself. No. United Creations is our business. We built it together. Matt burst out laughing. It was a chilling, unfamiliar laugh. Ours? Are you sure about that? He pulled out another document. Read right here. This is the Articles of Incorporation, and this is the transfer of shares. Your signature is at the bottom. You waived all your rights in my favor. I froze. I didn't remember signing anything like that. When? I don't remember. 3 years ago, when we were filing for new state licenses. I tucked it in among the tax returns you were signing at night. You were exhausted as usual and didn't even read. You trusted me blindly. My heart felt like it stopped. The betrayal was far deeper than I could have imagined. He had been planning this for 3 years. For 3 years, he let me work like a slave for a company that legally no longer belonged to me. So the company is 100% yours? My voice was barely audible. Exactly. And this house too. It was bought on a corporate account, which means it's mine. Laura's right. Pack your things and get out of here. I looked at Matt, searching for even a drop of pity. Nothing. Only cold impatience. Leave, Valerie. I don't want to see you anymore. But it's midnight. Where am I supposed to go? That's no longer my problem, he said, shoving me out of the bedroom. He dragged me down the stairs. Laura threw my work bag onto the hallway floor. Get lost. At that moment, the rain started, a true Chicago storm, as if the sky were weeping for my life. Matt kicked me out the door barefoot, in the same clothes I'd been wearing since morning. Matt, don't do this. I hammered on the door. The lock clicked. The porch light went out. I was left alone in the dark under the freezing rain. I collapsed to my knees on the threshold of my own home. The house I had dreamed of, the house I had built with my blood and sweat. Now I was thrown out like a stray dog. Everything was destroyed. My marriage, my career, my life. My parents were long dead. I had almost no friends left. I lived only for work. I had no money. All my savings were in a joint account that Matt had likely already blocked. An hour later, I stood up. My body was shaking. I picked up my bag. I had to leave. I walked through the deserted streets in the pouring rain, not feeling the stones on the asphalt cutting my bare feet. Finally, I reached a bus stop under a bridge. I sat on the cold iron bench. Inside was emptiness and unbearable pain. I began to rummage through my bag frantically. My wallet was there, but it only held my ID and a few small bills, not even enough for a cheap motel. I reached into the deepest pocket, one I almost never used. My fingers touched something hard. It was an old passbook, worn and blue, an account in my name. My father had opened it when I was just a child. Dad was an ordinary middle manager at a state company, but he adored me. Before he died 10 years ago, he gave me this book. Valerie, he said then, this is your account. Dad put a little in there. Don't touch it until a truly critical situation arises. Consider it my lucky charm for you. I opened it. The last time I had checked the balance was 7 or 8 years ago. At that time it showed $10,000. I had never touched that money. I had completely forgotten about it. In my current situation, $10,000 was a salvation. It would be enough to rent a room in the suburbs and hold out for a couple of months. Tomorrow, the first thing I would do was go to the bank. It was my only hope. I pressed the book to my chest. The morning sun hit my eyes. I woke up at that same bus stop, my whole body stiff. My clothes were damp and cold, clinging to my skin. My feet burned from scratches. Hunger twisted my stomach, but that pain was nothing compared to what was happening in my soul. Matt and Laura's faces were before my eyes. But I didn't let myself cry anymore. The tears had dried, only resolve remained. The resolve to survive. The bank was 3 miles away. I used to drive past it in my Mercedes. Today, I was walking there barefoot. Every step was a torture. People in business suits, rushing to their offices, looked at me with pity or disgust. I lowered my head. I, the one who led meetings at United Creations, now looked like a homeless person. Before entering the shining building of First National Bank, I hesitated. The security guard looked at me suspiciously. I tried to straighten my rumpled clothes, but it was useless. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. In the restroom, I washed with ice-cold water and tried to make myself presentable. I even washed my feet in the sink. I didn't care if anyone saw. I needed to look at least minimally decent so they wouldn't kick me out. I took a ticket for the teller. My heart was pounding. What if the account was closed? What if the money was gone? Number 3, a voice called out. I approached the window. A middle-aged man in glasses smiled warmly. His badge read, Herbert. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? Good morning. I want to close my account and withdraw all the funds. I handed him the passbook and my ID. Herbert frowned, looking at the old book, then at me. One moment, Miss Valerie. Checking the data. I watched him enter the numbers. His eyebrows shot up. He entered them again more slowly. Then he stared at the monitor with wide eyes. Is something wrong? I asked, panicked. Is the 10,000 still there? Herbert didn't answer. He picked up the phone and said quietly, Sir, come to window 3. We have a priority client. Urgently. Priority client? I didn't understand. Soon a man in an expensive suit approached, the branch manager. He glanced at the monitor and went pale. Then he looked at me with a strange expression. A mix of respect, surprise, and disbelief. Miss Valerie? He asked in a trembling voice. Yes, sir. Please come with me to my office. We need to talk. Herbert, you too. I was let out of the line. Other customers watched me with curiosity. I felt like a criminal. Maybe my dad had debts. I was brought into a luxurious VIP room on the 2nd floor. Leather sofas, a massive oak table, the scent of expensive coffee. Please sit down, Miss Valerie. What would you like? Coffee, water? Just water, sir. What's going on? Can I not take my money? The manager sat opposite me, while Herbert held a tablet. It's not that, ma'am, the manager said softly. We were just surprised. This account hasn't been active for a very long time. We have to double-check everything. Herbert handed the tablet to the manager, who slid it over to me. Miss Valerie, Herbert began. You said you wanted to withdraw $10,000? Yes, that's all I have. Herbert swallowed and pointed to a line on the screen. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm confirming the data. Did you mean 10 million US dollars? The world froze for the second time in the last 12 hours. No, I whispered. That's impossible. It's a mistake. My father was an ordinary employee. 10,000, sir. Not millions. The data is accurate, ma'am. Herbert shook his head. Your current balance is $10,450,000. And that's not counting other assets. I was speechless. The air-conditioned room suddenly felt unbearably stifling. You're joking. I exhaled. My father died 10 years ago. Where did that kind of money come from? The manager handed me a glass of water. Drink some water, ma'am. Calm down. It's not a mistake. This is not an ordinary savings account. It's a trust fund established by your late father. A trust fund? I had never heard that word applied to my family. You see, Herbert explained, long before his death, your father placed significant assets in our bank. Not just cash. The $10,000 you saw in the book was only the initial deposit 20 years ago. After his death, according to his secret instructions, All his assets from a bank in Switzerland were transferred here and consolidated into this fund. Our wealth management department has professionally managed it all these years. I was silent. My father, the man who made me breakfast and always wore the same shirt to the office. That man had an account in Switzerland? The capital has been growing for all 10 years, Herbert continued. Your father's instructions were very clear. The fund was not to be touched by anyone, not even you, until a state of emergency or a specific date. I remembered my dad's words. When you are in real trouble. He knew. How? Can I take this money? I asked. Of course. The manager answered hastily. We can issue part of it in cash today if needed. We will also issue premium cards for you right now. Money. Suddenly I had so much of it that I could buy dozens of houses like the one Matt had taken away. But something else bothered me. Why? Why did he hide it? Wait, Herbert said, his face turning serious. There is something else. Perhaps the most important thing. He opened another file on the tablet. In addition to managing the fund, there was one very specific automatic instruction. It was activated exactly 2 years ago. 2 years ago. I quickly did the math. That was exactly when United Creations started to grow rapidly. That was when Matt said he had found a raw material supplier with incredibly low prices. That was when he started disappearing at work and became colder. What is the instruction? Your father ordered the bank on that very date to use a large portion of the fund's assets to aggressively buy shares of one specific company. I had a bad feeling. We were to buy out as many shares as possible from a private distribution firm. It's called Star Logistics. I frowned. I had never heard that name. I don't know that company. What does it have to do with me? We conducted an internal investigation when the order was triggered, the manager said. Star Logistics is the country's only exclusive supplier of key raw materials for the needs of United Creations. I felt a chill run down my spine. The company you built with your husband has been completely dependent on Star Logistics supplies for the last 2 years, the manager said slowly. And as of today, you officially own 60% of the shares of that company. You are the majority shareholder. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a gift. It was a plan. Checkmate, prepared by my father 10 years ago. There is one more thing, Herbert added. There is a safety deposit box linked to your account. We have the key. According to the instructions, we are to hand it over to you as soon as you gain access to the account. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay a heavy brass key. What's in there? We don't know, ma'am. Only you can open it. My mind was racing. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a woman thrown out into the street. In my hands was a weapon, a time bomb for Matt. Sir, I looked at the manager. My voice no longer trembled. It was cold and calculating. Take me to the box. Now. The air in the bank's vault was cool and smelled of aged paper and cold steel. The manager, Mr. Henderson, led me past rows of gleaming metal doors until we reached a secluded corner. He inserted the bank's master key, then stepped back to give me privacy. My hands trembled as I inserted the heavy brass key I had just received. With a satisfying click, the heavy door of box number 402 swung open. Inside was a single, thick leather binder and a small USB drive. I opened the binder. The first page was a letter in my father's unmistakable, sharp handwriting. Valerie, my dear daughter, it began. If you are reading this, it means my worst fears came true. I never liked Matt. I saw the way he looked at our family, not with love, but with calculation. I knew that his ambition would eventually outweigh his conscience. I couldn't tell you this while I was alive. You were so in love, and you wouldn't have believed me. I needed you to find your own strength. The money in this account isn't just a gift, it's a shield. But the binder contains something more important. I spent my final years investigating Matt's father and his early business dealings. I found out where the seed money for his first success came from. It wasn't honest work. Matt is a carbon copy of him. This binder contains proof of tax evasion and money laundering schemes Matt has been using to prop up United Creations over the last 2 years. Use this wisely. Don't just take back what is yours. Destroy the corruption he built on your hard work. I love you. Always. Dad. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. My father hadn't just left me a fortune, he had left me a roadmap for justice. Is everything all right, Ms. Valerie? Mr. Henderson asked from a respectful distance. Better than all right, Mr. Henderson, I said, tucking the binder under my arm. I need to make a few calls. First, I need the best corporate attorney in Chicago. Not one of those TV lawyers. I want a shark. Someone like Harvey Specter, but real. I believe I have just the person for you, M. Let's head back to my office. By 2 p.m., I was sitting in a high-rise office overlooking Millennium Park. Across from me sat Diana Vance, a woman whose reputation for winning impossible cases made her the most feared lawyer in the Midwest. This is quite a collection of evidence, Valerie, Diana said, flipping through my father's binder. If this USB drive contains what you say it does, your husband, excuse me, your soon-to-be ex-husband, hasn't just committed a civil wrong. He's looking at federal charges. RICO, wire fraud, the works. I don't just want him in jail, Diana, I said, my voice steady. I want United Creations back. But first, I want to see him squirm. He thinks he's a genius. I want to show him who actually ran that company. Diana smiled, a cold, professional glint in her eyes. I like your style. Now about that majority stake in Star Logistics. Do you realize what that means? It means I own his oxygen supply, I replied. Exactly. Without the raw materials from Star Logistics, United Creations can't fulfill the new global contract he just signed. If they miss the deadline, the penalties will bankrupt the company in 30 days. He's trapped, and he doesn't even know it yet. The next morning, I didn't look like the broken woman who had been kicked out into the rain. I used a small portion of my funds to transform. I went to a high-end boutique on Michigan Avenue and bought a charcoal gray power suit, Italian leather heels, and a pair of designer sunglasses. I had my hair done, a sharp, professional bob. I took a deep breath as I pulled up to the United Creations building in a black Escalade provided by the bank's concierge service. The security guard at the front desk, a man named Joe who I used to bring donuts to every Monday, didn't even recognize me at first. Can I help you, ma'am? He asked politely. It's Valerie, Joe, I said, lowering my glasses. His jaw dropped. Ms. Valerie? Oh my God, we heard. Matt said you had a breakdown and went to a retreat. The only thing that broke was my patience, Joe, I said with a wink. Is he upstairs? Yes, ma'am. He's in the main boardroom with the board members and some new investors. Perfect. Let's give them a show. I walked toward the elevators, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. Every step felt like a drumbeat of war. When I reached the 42nd floor, the receptionist tried to stop me. Ms. Valerie. You can't go in there. Matt said. Matt doesn't own this floor anymore, Sarah. He just doesn't know it yet. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. The room was full. Matt was at the head of the table, leaning back with a smug grin, showing a presentation to 3 men in expensive suits, the new investors. Laura was sitting right next to him, taking notes and looking like she already owned the place. And as you can see, our projections for the next quarter are unprecedented, Matt was saying. Now that we've streamlined our management. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. The smug grin vanished, replaced by a look of pure confusion and then annoyance. Valerie? What the hell are you doing here? He stood up, smoothing his tie. I thought I made it clear. You're no longer part of this company. Security. Sit down, Matt, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. I walked to the opposite end of the table and threw a folder onto the center. And don't bother with security. I've already told them I'm here. Laura sneered. Did you spend your last few dollars on that suit, Valerie? It won't help. You signed the papers. You have nothing. Get out before we have you arrested for trespassing. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on Matt. Gentlemen, I addressed the investors. I assume Mr. Sterling hasn't told you about the logistics crisis that is about to hit this company? The investors looked at each other, then at Matt. What crisis? One of them asked. Matt laughed nervously. She's delusional. She's a disgruntled ex-employee and ex-wife. She's just trying to sabotage the deal. Am I? I pulled out a tablet and tapped a few buttons. A document appeared on the large screen behind Matt, replacing his colorful charts. It was a formal notice of termination of supply from Star Logistics. Matt turned around and stared at the screen. His face went pale. What is this? This is a mistake. I have a contract with Star. Actually, you have a contract that allows for immediate termination in the event of management instability or ethical violations, I said calmly. And as the new majority owner of Star Logistics, Eve decided that United Creations no longer meets our ethical standards. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. You bought Star Logistics? Matt stammered, his voice cracking. With what money? You don't have a dime. That's where you're wrong, Matt. My father was a much better businessman than you'll ever be. He made sure I was protected. While you were busy stealing my work and playing house with your secretary, I was reclaiming my inheritance. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. As of 10 minutes ago, Star Logistics has ceased all shipments to United Creations. Without those materials, your production line stopped tonight. You'll default on the global contract by Friday. Your stock will plummet to zero. These gentlemen, I pointed to the investors, will withdraw their offer, and you will be left with a mountain of debt and a very expensive house you can't afford. The investors were already standing up, grabbing their briefcases. Sterling, we're out. Call us when you've settled your family drama. Actually, don't call us at all. Wait. No. It's a bluff. Matt screamed, but they were already out the door. Laura looked terrified. She looked at Matt, then at me, then back at Matt. She saw the ship sinking and was clearly looking for a life raft. Valerie, honey, Matt said, his voice suddenly shifting to that manipulative, soft tone he used when he wanted something. Let's be reasonable. We can talk about this. I was stressed. I made a mistake with Laura. We can fix the company together. Oh, we're not fixing anything together, Matt, I said. I pulled out a second folder, the one Diana Vance had prepared. This is a formal offer to buy your remaining shares of United Creations for $1 each. You're insane. The alternative is this, I said, sliding the USB drive across the table. On this drive is the evidence of the shell companies you used to dodge taxes, and the kickback scheme you ran through the Indiana warehouse. My lawyer is waiting for my call. Either you sign over the company and walk away with your freedom, or I call the FBI, and you spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Matt stared at the drive as if it were a poisonous snake. He looked at Laura, who was already backing away toward the door. You wouldn't, he whispered. Try me. You threw me out in the rain like trash, Matt. You tried to erase 5 years of my life. I'm not just taking the company. I'm taking everything. His hands were shaking so much he could barely hold the pen. But he knew he was caught. He had no leverage, no money, and no allies. One by one, he signed the documents, relinquishing every claim to the empire I had built. When he was done, he looked up, his eyes hollow. Are you happy now? I took the papers and tucked them into my bag. I'm not happy, Matt. I'm satisfied. Now get out of my office. And take your assistant with you. The following weeks were a whirlwind. With Diana Vance's help, I scrubbed the company clean. We cooperated with a minor tax audit, paid the fines using the trust fund, and rebranded. United Creations became V Legacy Group. I didn't just keep the company, I expanded it. Integrating Star Logistics was a masterstroke that my father had practically gift-wrapped for me. We were now a vertically integrated powerhouse in the Chicago market. I moved out of the house in Lincoln Park. It had too many ghosts. I bought a penthouse in the Gold Coast, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Lake Michigan. One Friday evening, about 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and violet. I was no longer working 80 hours a week, because I had to. I was doing it because I loved it. I had a team I trusted, and for the first time in my life, I had balance. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Local businessman Matthew Sterling indicted on fraud charges. It turned out that while I hadn't called the feds, someone else did. One of the investors he had tried to scam before I stepped in had filed a complaint, and the paper trail my father left led the authorities straight to Matt's doorstep. He was broke, his reputation was in tatters, and he was facing a long trial. Laura, predictably, had vanished the moment his bank accounts were frozen. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the framed photo on my desk. It was a picture of my father and me at my college graduation. He was beaming with pride. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "I'm not just a mule anymore. I'm the architect." I grabbed my bag, a designer one this time, but I still kept the old blue bank book in a secret compartment. It was a reminder of where I came from, and the man who believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. I walked out of the office, nodding to the night security. "Good night, MS. Valerie," he said. "Good night, Joe. Go home to your family. I'll see you Monday." I stepped out into the crisp Chicago air. It wasn't raining tonight. The stars were out, and for the first time in 5 years, the future didn't look like a mountain of work. It looked like an adventure. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. If it resonated with you, give it a like, comment on what touched you the most, and be sure to mention where you're from. Subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories to come.